Welcome, everybody, to the special meeting of the Northampton City Council to discuss procedures, practices, or rules relative to Council Rule 4.8. Today is November 9th, 2023 at 4:30 p.m., and here we are in council chambers. This is an in-person meeting, but we are recording this meeting for our administrative assistant to be able to type up the minutes afterwards. She couldn't be here today because she's feeling ill. So I am going to do the roll. Councilor Elkins.
Here.
Councilor Gore.
Here.
Councilor Moulton.
Here.
Councilor Foster.
Here.
Councilor Nash. Here. Councilor Perry.
Here.
Councilor Jarrett.
Here.
Councilor Labarge.
Here.
Councilor Maori.
Here.
Okay, all of us are here, and I'm grateful that all of us are here for this important discussion. So we were all there last week, and I think we handled things as best we could then, and you know what, I was proud of the way we handled things. That we were all here for each other, but that was last week, and this week we need to consider a way forward. And I can tell you, since the comments started at around, I don't know, 7:20, 7:25 last week, I was starting to click through my head, like, what can we do? As I'm sure all of you were as well. And that has, I'm grateful that, I know you've all been researching this matter to come up with ideas for how we might approach things. I can tell you that Councilor Foster and I have been working with the mayor and Attorney Seawald to consider legal approaches to figure out ways to move forward. So, today, to start this discussion off, I've asked Attorney Seawald to walk us back through to help frame what public comment is and the First Amendment and how that how it's different from all of the other items on our agenda, and what's at stake here. And so, Attorney Seawald, you ready for your primer on the First Amendment?
I'm ready, thank you.
Can you turn your microphone green? Mostly ready.
No, I think I'm on mute.
There you go.
No,
You now have your
This
right
is
to
not the
speak.
first time today the mayor hasn't given me a tutorial on some technology. That is absolutely true. Google Docs was this morning. So thank you for inviting me here, and I'm happy to help you work your way through this in any way I can, in the best way that you can. So let's just take an overview of the First Amendment as it applies to situations like this. There are, the first part of the analysis is to determine what kind of forum we're dealing with. So there are, generally speaking, three kinds of forum, okay? Pulaski Park is a traditional forum. No one needs permission to go out and speak there or to hold a sign or do anything. And in order to prevent somebody from expressing themselves in a place like a common, a sidewalk, park like this, you would need some extremely difficult to reach rationale. And it's what we call strict scrutiny. A compelling governmental interest that there is no less restrictive way of achieving. I mean, it's very, very difficult to stop somebody from First Amendment expression in a place like that. Then there are places like your business meeting, which is not a forum at all, a First Amendment forum at all. And no one has the right to speak during the business part of your meeting without being recognized. And there are significant limitations on what people can say even when they're recognized, because they have to speak to what the issue is that's being discussed. So those are the two ends of the spectrum. In the middle are what we call limited public forum. a public forum that's not a traditional public forum, but is opened by the government, that would be you, for a limited purpose. And so right now, you really haven't limited the forum as far as the content goes. You've limited as far as the time goes. There's a time limitation. But you haven't done any other limitations. And so it's very difficult to stop people from speaking if you give them the right to speak about whatever they want to speak about. And, you know, the Supreme Judicial Court and other courts have ruled that just because something is offensive doesn't mean it's not protected by the First Amendment. And this concept of group defamation, talking about a group as opposed to talking about an individual person, is really not recognized as an exception to the First Amendment. So you have, you know, this problem when you open a forum without any restrictions at all. This is what can happen. And it's the exception, not the rule. I think that the vast majority of people who come before this body for public comment do so for completely appropriate purposes, and even if sometimes we don't want to hear what they have to say, it's completely appropriate. But there are exceptions, and they do they rear their ugly head every now and then when something external, generally when something external happens to sort of, you know, prompt it. So that's where we were last week. So the spectrum of the possible limitations that you can place on public comment, you know, run the gamut, because it's your forum, you've created the forum, and you can limit the forum. But any limitation on the forum to avoid what we saw last Thursday will inevitably sweep with it some of those legitimate uses of public comment. And that's the balance that this body has to really reach on how much are we willing to limit what, you know, what people want to address to you in order to prevent or minimize the possibility of what happened last Thursday happening again. Some examples of things that can be done and that other communities do: sign up in advance, state the topic on, you know, about which the person wants to speak, not their viewpoint, just the topic, okay? Not what they think about it. Limiting it to residents only. You know, any way that you can think of limiting this in terms of time, place, and manner, you have the right to do, because it's your forum that you've created. The one thing that is always, almost always forbidden is taking action based on the viewpoint that's being expressed. It's often said you can't allow people come in here to praise you and then not allow people come in here to criticize you. You got to take all of the viewpoints if you're going to take any of the viewpoints, and if you're going to allow, you know, this to, you know, the topic to be discussed. And so that's generally the overview. If there's something more you want me to focus in on, I'm happy to do that.
Any questions, councilors? Councilor Jarrett.
What is the line between hate speech and threats?
I'm not going to be able to give you a bright line between the two, okay? Hate speech is protected by the First Amendment. Threats are not. Generally speaking, there's this doctrine called fighting words. So historically and to this day, words that would cause, that are spoken face to face, that would cause a reasonable person to react with violence is not protected by the First Amendment. Other things like running into a theater, we talk about this all the time, running into a theater, screaming fire, is not protected by the First Amendment. What we heard last Thursday was certainly hateful, but it wasn't threatening. And, you know, threatening would generally, I believe, have to, you know, target a particular person as opposed to a group.
So the fighting words kind of brings up an interesting issue to me, which is that if somebody's standing right there at that podium and says something, I think some of this speech might fall under the fighting words in the sense that we're all here and it could happen, but on Zoom, it's different. Do you know of any case law or any discussion of?
I haven't found case law that, that applies fighting words to Zoom. And, a fighting words doctrine has always been face-to-face, and it's intended to prevent violence. And so violence is just not going to happen on Zoom, so I'm not really sure that that's something we can rely on.
I mean, I actually agree with that. That's sort of the conundrum here, which is,
Yes,
it seems like we would have some latitude to say, Council Labarge is about to get up and punch you in the face if you don't cut it out. But Zoom is not prone to that.
And, I have to say,
No, you would do.
public comment is relatively new, and there's just not a lot of case law. There's really only one SJC case on public comment, and it wasn't about hate speech. It was, it was a case about something that was actually going on in town, and somebody was cut off for criticizing the board for having been found to be in violation of open meeting, and then, when the chair was going to cut her off, she called him a Hitler, and the SJC said, no, that's absolutely protected by the First Amendment. All of it's protected by the First Amendment.
Councilor Labarge.
Thank you. We're talking about Zoom, but this could actually happen right here in the chamber.
It could.
Either which way.
It could, but I think that, experience has shown that when somebody is on Zoom, doesn't have to show their face, can use a pseudonym, and is anonymous, it's much easier to do.
Yeah, Attorney Seawald, I have received several emails in regards to last Thursday's city council meeting, in regards of we would have the ability to go ahead and just do residents in Northampton, this is what they're saying to me. Also, when we're doing Zooming, that they should be either filling out a paper, who they are, where they live, and full-blown picture of them like everybody else does. That decision would be up to councilors.
Yes, it would.
Councilor Maori.
So Attorney Seawald, may we as a council make our own rules around hate speech or expectations around public comment, and then we can utilize those. So for example, if we have a rule that after 3 concerted comments that are considered hate speech, that we shut down public comment. Can we have internal integrity in our own rules by making rules, because it's not a right to be able to give public comment by Zoom? Can we make our own internal rules and then they can be triggered to have a consequence, and therefore you're removing what you're saying of the risk of individual bias. I don't like what they're saying, but really clearly define what our expectations are around public comment, and then if that's violated, we have things that happen.
If it's within the rules, let me rephrase that. You cannot define hate speech to be something more restrictive than what's protected by the First Amendment. Okay? The way that you would have to do that would be to limit the topics upon which those who are at public comment can comment on. You could limit it to matters that are within the jurisdiction of the city council. You could limit it to matters that are on the agenda for that night's meeting. But unless you limit the scope of what can be talked about in your rules, you can't redefine hate speech to be something that's protected by the first, and eliminate what's protected by the First Amendment. You cannot do that.
Right, but that's, I guess I'm referring to exactly what you're saying, is that we limit it in those ways.
If you
they're
limit it to matters that are on the agenda, and somebody is addressing a matter on the agenda, even if they use hate speech,
Right.
they're addressing matters on the agenda, and you cannot preclude them from what we're calling hate speech. Hate speech is protected by the First Amendment, which means that government cannot prevent people from saying those things.
Well, correct, but I'm just thinking there's protected and there's unprotected speech, and there's fighting words, there's also imminent threats. And part of that might be creating an environment where certain groups are intimidated to be at city council because of hate speech. So I guess I'm saying it sounds a little gray there too, but I do think it sounds like we can make some, we can make our own rules and then keep, and then and then have those as the basis for our decision-making, and therefore avoid the conundrum of, kind of on the fly, making what could seem like a personal decision.
Let me just give you an example. If Picture Main Street were on the agenda and someone wanted to come and tell you that they oppose Picture Main Street because certain groups would be in town, you can't prevent that.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Moulton.
Thank you. So it seems to me that the other side of the equation, in terms of rulemaking, is enforceability. And the judgment that will have to be made by the presiding president, whoever's presiding at the meeting, because based on what I've read in other communities where this has happened, the hate speakers do refer to something that's on the agenda and then meander away from it at some point. So it will be a judgment call, and I'm fine with that, but that puts a burden on the presiding officer to, at what point does someone stray enough from the topic to be disruptive because they're not staying with the topic, not because of the hate speech, but they're not on topic.
I should have prefaced all of this by telling you that I have no poison tip arrow that you can shoot at this. There's no perfect solution that is going in every situation to, prevent this from happening. It's just, you've opened up a forum, and there are people out there who will abuse that right. And there's just, I wish I could tell you that there was something that was perfect. There isn't. And so, but at least it puts a tool in the toolkit for the presiding officer to cut someone off if they, start with Picture Main Street and veer into immigrants or whatever. All of a sudden, they're on a different topic, and it does, gives the presiding officer something to use.
So I want to respond to what you guys were talking about. So, yeah, Alan and I have been going back, and we had a phone call about an hour ago about this, that if we are to strengthen things in terms of, you need to speak to something on the agenda or a matter before council, there's so much gray area in terms of, so all of the speech that we heard last week, was allowable under public comment. And then for, whoever's presiding to figure out, are they really off topic? And one of them amazingly wove in, support of Picture Main Street at the end of their raid, their rant. And so, I'm just going to say it's uncomfortable to be in the seat and having to figure out that particular piece. And that, so, there you go. Councilor Maori.
I just had a clarifying question I forgot to ask about fighting words. Isn't it also provoking violence or inciting violence? So
No, it would have to be an immediate reaction of violence, not, we're, creating an environment where it might be more likely that violence will arise, that's not fighting words.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Gill.
A couple other clarifying questions. Is the video protected in the sense that if someone's on Zoom and their image, is that something that we would be required to allow them to show? And are there certain, for example, if there's obscene things happening, are we allowed to stop that? Could you speak to that?
Well, obscenity is not protected by the First Amendment, so that could be eliminated. But as we all know, I know when I see it, but I can't define it. So, that's always the problem. And don't forget, this is, I don't need to tell you, this is all happening on the fly. It's not like you have the opportunity to sit back and cogitate over this. It's happening real time. And so it's very difficult. And so obscenity is not protected by the First Amendment. You just got to be careful that it's actually obscene. I'm sorry, I missed the beginning, the other part of your question?
So video in general, are we allowed to turn someone's video off? Is that only if it was be obscene?
Right, if it were obscene, you would, if the words somehow violated your rules or strayed past First Amendment protection, the presiding officer could mute them.
Right.
If if they're showing something that's obscene, then you could turn the video off, absolutely.
Okay.
Because it's not protected by the First Amendment if they're outside the limited forum or if they're displaying something obscene.
Right. Thank you.
Counselor Gore.
So, hate speech is considered disruptive to the meeting only when it's like considered fighting words?
Hate speech is protected by the First Amendment. People can say hateful things, and it's protected by the First Amendment. Fighting words is a doctrine that deals with face-to-face, immediate response by a reasonable person with violence. Those are those two concepts.
Counselor Elton.
Can we put a requirement on people wishing to comment by Zoom that we don't necessarily put on people who come in person? So by that, I mean, you show up in person, you sign up on the list, you're here, and we have the ability, to kind of deal with the fighting words kind of situation. Can we, on Zoom, open in advance of the meeting, a sign-up sheet for a limited number of spots and insist that people sign up? I think Zoom has the capability that you have to just, I think it has the capability, like you can do a sign up and it has to be verified. I mean, we talked a little bit also this afternoon, and we talked a little bit about, if we do something, maybe it's allowed, but what's the enforceability of it? And it's not reasonable on the fly to say, oh, that looks like a fake name, or we've started this barrage of things, and Google people on the, the fly to see if they really are so-and-so who's lived here for 15 years, which, is, in the case of what happened last week was there were some of the people clearly lying about that. It was clearly untrue. So I'm just wondering if we opened up 15 slots and the only way you got to participate in public comment by Zoom is to fill out our form and whether or not, and I was concerned about enforceability, and we talked about that a little bit. Is 15 Google checks or checks against the voter rolls or anything like that, is that unreasonable? Is that onerous on any city staff or anything like that, or council president or whatever?
I'll kick that over.
That part is not your question, but the first part is there any issue?
No, I don't
Any
think
issue with
so.
the different set of rules for that purpose?
In Boston, you have to sign up and state the topic that you want to address, not your viewpoint, just the topic. And when you properly fill out the form, they'll send you the Zoom link. You don't properly fill out the form, you don't get the Zoom link. Now, obviously, I'll shoot of the mayor, but I would surmise that Boston has, more human beings to deal with this than
Yes.
we do. But, if you're asking me whether that is permissible, I think it is.
Counselor Foster. And then Counselor LeBarge.
So I guess,
Karen had her hand up.
oh, well, yeah, I guess maybe it's worth just piping in. Counselor Nash and I and Attorney Seawald did have a chance to talk quite a bit and have a draft of a proposed rule change. It may be helpful to have something concrete for us to look at, and what we have as a draft has been, everything in there is legal, and then maybe that would help to focus discussion if we had something specific right in front of us that we could see ourselves using for future meetings. Does that sound reasonable?
Sure.
Okay.
Mr.
We
President?
have it on paper, so nobody has to remember.
Can I just say one more thing?
Yes, go right ahead.
Counselor Elkins, there was a case on that sign-up sheet, by the way, and the person filled in, the topic was, "I'll tell you later," and refused to send them the Zoom link, and the court upheld that. You didn't fill out the form, you didn't tell them what the topic was, you don't get the Zoom link.
Do you know, was it
This was a person who didn't get the Zoom link.
okay.
Counselor LeBarge, can we talk about this first, Counselor LeBarge, and then we'll come back to you?
No, I just want to repeat.
Oh, go ahead.
that she said
Go ahead,
quickly.
then we'll get
You
back.
talked about Boston, and I brought that to your attention about Cambridge. Exactly the same thing.
So there's a lot of scratch marks here. What I'll do, I'll go ahead and read it. I know that doesn't work for everybody, but it works for some. I'll read it without the parts that are changed, and then we can discuss. So this is just the section 4.8 of the council rules that rely on public comment. Members of the public may address the council and all council committees on matters on the agenda for that meeting only, for a period of up to 2 minutes. So this is a change. What's scratched out is the term "any matter." So that's what's a proposal for being different. Public comment may be accepted for no more than 90 minutes total for each meeting. Whenever language translation is required for a member of the public to address the city council, such person shall be provided 4 minutes. Individuals wishing to speak at public comment must sign up through the link embedded on the meeting's agenda no later than 1 hour in advance of the meeting. And just a process note, we can do that with a Google form, and Laura can embed that in our agenda as a sign up here link. During the public comment period, those wishing to speak will be recognized in the order in which they signed up by the presiding officer, and shall state their name and city or town of residence prior to making their comment. No person shall speak during public comment unless recognized by the presiding officer. At the discretion of the presiding officer, a commenter's time may be reduced if their comment is not relevant to the meeting's agenda. Councilors will not respond to any comments from the public. The city council will take public comment in person or by remote participation as the technology allows for those who have signed up at least 1 hour in advance of the meeting. At their discretion, and if time allows, after all who signed up ahead of time have spoken, the presiding officer may offer those physically present in the room a chance to make a public comment. So the difference there is people who come, who are used to the paper sign-up sheet, could still have the opportunity to make a public comment, but people planning to participate on Zoom, the form would close an hour before the meeting.
And I'm going to try to share my screen here. And pull up.
Oh, yeah, and just as a framework, I had a great conversation with the administrative assistant from the Cambridge City Council earlier this week, and I know people have seen that. And so what Councilor Nash has there is the public comment sign-up form that's being used in Cambridge. And this is what they're using for their meetings. And they also do that the comments need to be related to an item on the agenda.
I'm filling in for Laura.
You're doing great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
They have an excellent setup.
Yeah, so they take first name, last name, email, address, and phone number, and the agenda item the person plans to discuss. And so, a Google form, this just exports quickly into the spreadsheet, and we would have that ahead of time. But they have the resources for it to be embedded in the city website.
Yeah, and I'd like to add that the idea of having a sign-up sheet very much, in many ways, mirrors what we do here in person, that we have a sign-up sheet
Yep.
that's available for people at the podium. However, in the language here, we're making accommodations for people who are actually here present and have, decide after hearing some public comment, they would like to also add more, which is something we've traditionally done. I think the only change that I would make is I would ask that they actually sign the sign-up sheet before they have the floor. So then we're consistently doing much the same thing. And that, so, yeah, one of the things that we spoke, Karen and I have been doing a lot of work. We spoke with somebody, a lawyer who does work with insurance companies, verifying people's IDs and things like that. But one of the things he spoke about is by being consistent both in person and remotely, that you have some power there. So, so that's the idea of the sign-up sheet here.
And I guess if I can just
Foster.
pipe in, just for like background as well, so I guess it's been since September, there's been a coordinated effort to disrupt local meetings. And there are cities and towns that have removed remote public comment, but that's something that we're seeing in Northampton, I think has become something that we value and our constituents value, and we as a council, at least I personally have valued. So the goal has been to kind of thread the needle to allow for the public participation of our residents who can't physically be here, while also, creating the steps that may help to direct it within our meetings.
Well, Counselor Elkins, hold it, you wanted to say something. Did you get your chance to say?
I did.
Okay. Counselor Elkins, then Counselor Maori.
Thank you for this and all the work that you guys have done on it. And I guess I have two thoughts. One, I'm not sure that I think we ought to do the sign up ahead of time for in-person. I think if you get yourself here and we're protected by fighting words, because I understand hate speech is protected, but if somebody literally just gets up and says that, it's hard. You're hard pressed to imagine that doesn't fall in fighting words. I don't know if you agree, but and also just experience tells us people are not going to come in here and say those things at the podium directly in front of us. That's not what that's. I don't. If that becomes a risk, we can talk about it. And the other thing too is I actually think so. If we don't do that, and then we have the sort of limited number of slots for Zoom, that then we, if we are crunched for time, that we prioritize people who come in person. I mean, we want to be equal and we want to be fair, and if you signed up, but since if we make it so that we don't know in advance if we have a crowd that comes in person, and we have to balance it between the limited number of spots that we have online, that we can choose to prioritize the in-person. I mean, in a fair way, like maybe every 2 in person for every 1 on Zoom or something. But so that's my only thing about that, is like I wouldn't want to limit in person to a sign up ahead of time, because people get here and they want to talk. I feel inclined to let them. I mean, I'm inclined to let everybody. That's what we're here about, but
Thank you. Counselor Maori.
Yes. Thank you very much for this. It's very thoughtfully done, and I appreciate, we've talked a lot about that Zoom provides accessibility to, and it's interesting because the pandemic hit a couple months after we started council, and we really didn't know what would happen in terms of who it would leave behind and who would, who would, and that was my big concern at the time. And then what we found was we got a whole new range of participation, from busy parents cooking dinner, folks who are not mobile or have compromised immune systems, and it was a good surprise that we were getting and continue to receive a lot of participation from our residents. So I appreciate that you're trying to preserve that, even though it really isn't baked in right. I do appreciate that. And I think it's okay to, you know, to make some limitations around that. I guess my other question was just getting back to Councilor Jarrett's, the issue that he raised. Can we also prohibit images being displayed when your camera is off? Just across the board?
Counselor Foster.
Just, I guess by way of background, there have been, I do a lot here, with managing those Zoom meetings, and there have been times where obscene background images have come through, and so we have a Zoom setting where we can just display names. So, you know, as obscene images have come up, we've been able to.
So just to clarify, then we don't really need to bake that into the rules because it's something we can already do.
Right.
Okay. I just thought that was.
But it pertains to obscenity only, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but obscenity only, like we can't, if somebody puts a swastika up or some, you know, sign on their background that is a racial epithet or something like that, that we can't do, if we do anything about.
So
Attorney
I
Seawolf.
believe that you could have a general rule
That's
that
what I'm
names
talking-
only. Okay?
That's what I'm
And-
asking.
But what I don't want to see is picking certain symbols, signs, words, and, you know, prohibiting those images while allowing other images. So it's either no images or it's unregulated. Because then it's not viewpoint dependent. It is everyone, no matter what you do. If you want to, you know, put up a climate change image, it's not going to happen. If you want to put up a swastika, that's not going to happen. It's all or none, because you can't pick between viewpoints.
Yeah, that's why I said across the board. I'm trying to, I think the easiest thing for those presiding over the meetings and attending, you know, and the counselors is to have, you know, have the rules laid out ahead of time and know what trips them. And so, yeah, I hear that. I'm also hearing that we've got our wonderful vice president who's been, you know, able to kind of deal with that. But, and of course, it doesn't prevent the entire issue because you get people turn on their camera and have images that way. But I do think, you know, there's really, to me, that's, it's not an important part of accessibility to put an image up. This isn't, you know, this isn't a poster contest. This is public comment, and we're providing this, you know, vehicle for people to share their thoughts. And that, to me, doesn't have to be part of it. But whether we need to put that in the rules or not, I do really thank you for this. I think it's, thank you for spending so much time on it.
I just want to give Counselor Foster a lot of work for doing the research around Cambridge and pulling this together. Counselor Moulton.
Yes, thank you for all this work. And I just want to add my voice to Councilor Foster and Councilor Maori in expressing my strong feeling that we have made a commitment here to hybrid meetings, and I don't think we want to give up remote participation. I think that would be a very unfortunate byproduct of something that we can thread the needle on, I think, in other ways. But I did have a clarifying question about the 1 hour advance sign-up. Was that intended to apply to both remote and to in-person?
No, that's just to apply to remote.
Okay, so...
Once people are here, they're free to sign up while they're here, while the meeting's going on.
Okay, so I wanted to ask Councilor Elkins do you object to our continuing our practice of having, you know, people who are here?
No, I read this to, here, up to 2 minutes. The reason I came to this, it says individuals wishing to speak at public comment, and it doesn't say difference between Zoom or must sign up through the link embedded at the meeting's agenda. And then later, it says, City Council will take public comment in person or by remote participation as technology allows for those who have signed up for at least 1 hour in advance of the meeting. So that reads to me like, so, what are you looking at me like I was crazy? If that wasn't what you interpret.
No, I'm not, no, maybe we get it. So, yeah, that was tricky. The idea with the last sentence, which maybe should probably come a lot earlier, was that if there's time after the people who have signed up, then the presiding officer can allow everybody in the room to participate without having signed up ahead of time.
Right, so in which case then I would say that, that we need to distinguish. Individuals wishing to speak at public comment through, by Zoom must sign up. Remotely, must do the sign up. We need to make it clear that people can show up and just do the regular method.
Yeah, can I respond?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Yes. I guess a question I have, or that has come up as we've thought about how we juggle public comment, is that 90-minute time period, that public comment can only go on for 90 minutes. And so we haven't had this recently. But, there are certain topics that would generate probably 3-4 hours of people wishing to make a comment. And with 90 minutes, it's almost more about, how do we allocate the time fairly? So that's, at least for me in the background, the idea of we give everybody the chance to speak, to sign up ahead of time. They get called on in the order they speak. And then people who are here in the room can speak if there's more, if there's time available. But that, it was more about how do we allocate the time during the meeting between remote and in-person participation.
Right, I guess, but that's why I'm like, if all this time goes, if all this time goes to, if we do a whole, 45 minutes of slot sign up and they all get signed up for on Zoom, then, that, as half of it, that, half of it, but we can't make 90 minutes worth of public comment available on Zoom, because then people here.
People wishing,
So right now, the format is the room remote, the room remote. And we go down and that we use the queue on Zoom to figure out who had their hand up first, which I learned only this week that that's probably not the way. The mayor informed me, no, they're not always in order, that they're actually on the participant list, they might be in a, so anyway. But we're actually already using the system already, that we use the sign-up sheet here, and then, and by using this, requiring this remote sign-up, that would be the sign-up list. And they'd be time-stamped, and we would go by the person who signed up first, and that we'd alternate between the two until the 90 minutes are up, and that's kind of the way we're doing it now. That is the way we're doing it, except without the...
Okay, I guess I think the language needs to be clear that, that Zoom, that we're talking about Zoom for the sign up, and that sign up, speaking in chambers will require the list. And I'm just saying that the way this last sentence reads to me is that, it reads to me like there's a risk that you would do all, I know we don't do that. I'm just saying it reads like you would do all the Zoom first and then the in-person. So that, I think, could be clear, is all I'm saying.
Councilor Foster.
we may have actually had slightly different intentions, which is fine. But that sign up would be available to anybody. So I actually was thinking, and again, it's a draft, so it doesn't need to be that, but I actually was thinking that everybody would have the opportunity to sign up prior to the meeting, and we would go in the order in which people signed up, and then people who were here would have a chance to speak, so that it wouldn't necessarily be the Zoom in person flip we're doing now, but that would allow us the chance to go through the comments in the order in which people signed up. So it's kind of like to treat people in the room and on Zoom more equally. That's what I was thinking.
Interesting, okay.
Perhaps we could include in the form then, whether or not they're, you know.
The Cambridge form does that.
It does.
That Cambridge, we can just go home, we just do everything that Cambridge did.
We're going to invite them out.
Counselor Mayor,
I have a different,
did you have your hand up?
I did, but if you have something else related to that, I was going to bring up another minor point. I don't want to break anyone's train of
Was
thought.
Counselor Labarge about to say something?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I was looking here and I saw hands go up over here. I wasn't quite sure who it
I was
was.
just doing this.
Yeah, cool.
I know,
Counselor Labarge.
thank you. I know you have the Cambridge ordinance there, the layout.
The form, yes.
Right. It's too bad you couldn't put it up so they could see it, because it's
Oh, I can do it
really
again.
interesting.
I'll do it again. Here's green.
I like the setup they have.
Yeah, here it is. So you can see, you select the meeting. For us, it'd be city council. This is speaking to what Councilor Foster was talking about. I'll be attending in person or remote. First, last name, email address, phone number. These are required features for their sign-up. And then the agenda item. The affiliation is optional. So, Counselor Elkins and then Counselor.
Oh, I'm sorry, did I jump you? I think, oh.
You're all just raising your hands.
Very engaged. I have to say, I like the Boston method of, I don't think I would, I think it, in terms of like, not limiting it to the agenda, but to just say, you just have to tell us what you're going to talk about. Because what Attorney Sewell described was that in Boston, that their form is, like, you have to tell us, not all the content, but just the topic on which you're going to speak. And then that would allow us to not, I mean, I would like to stay away from curtailing to just the agenda. I guess that's what I'm trying to say, is like, that seems like maybe a way to keep it a little more open to people being able to talk about trees if that's not on the agenda or whatever, but compel them to at least put something out there that we can respond to. And like, I'll tell you later, is a clear no-go kind of thing.
Counselor Mayor.
Yeah, I don't have a strong opinion about that, but it does,
Your mic.
oh, excuse me. It doesn't prevent the abuse, of course, we've talked about that you sign up for a topic and then you meander. But anyway, that's an interesting point. I was going to offer a minor amendment. It doesn't come up very often, but we have had residents with speech impediments, or we had a resident who had a heart condition and had to take several breaths. And if perhaps we could add a line around the language translation, or maybe in need of special accommodations. I don't want to open us up. It doesn't come up a lot. I don't want to open us up to, if that's going to allow, abuse. But I would like to allow for residents who do need that 4 minutes, and what we've done, it's been at the discretion of the president to say, yeah, take that 4 minutes because you have a speech impediment. It takes you longer to get your part out. But
I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say.
We have a rule relative to folks
already baked in.
that has to do if they're getting if translation is required.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We could add to that some sort of accommodation if there's some sort of
Yeah.
It's in the
needed
rules there.
speech support.
Yeah, that would be great unless Solicitor Sewell thinks if there's some unintended consequence. But I think that's something at the discretion of the presiding officer that they could.
You can certainly do that.
Okay.
Again, it's your forum, you define it.
So maybe.
Make sure it says interpreter on there.
Yeah, so add something just like, or in need of special.
Or special accommodation?
Yeah, special accommodations, or might
Due
be
to
something
disability.
better. If you think of something better. But
Yeah,
that's what
but
I was thinking.
it's not under this rule, right?
I thought it was.
It's under another rule.
I feel like it is
that
in
we can
there.
amend it. I remember reading it earlier.
Yeah.
There is a rule about contacting the ADA coordinator if you need accommodations to attend a meeting. But we could say attend or participate in public comment.
Okay. Thank you.
That could be a simple, find it.
Okay. Counselor Jarrett.
Thank you. Thank you for putting this forward for our discussion. I want to break apart the kind of two issues that we're talking about. One is limiting to matters on the agenda for this meeting only. That's one major change. And the other is signing up in advance. And I think we need to discuss both of those. I think we're considering changes to policy based on maybe 7 minutes of public comment. We probably would have received more, maybe we will receive more. And I just, for decades, this time has been a forum for the public to address the council on any topic. It is a general public forum for the city. So I'm, obviously there are many other ways to contact your counselor, but it's been a really important part of city council and of civic life here in Northampton, I think. So I am wary of making big changes, and I feel and think we should take steps slowly. And it's certainly the words we heard were very hurtful, very upsetting, but we need to consider that balance, have other communities found that this continues? Those are questions, or it's just something that happens occasionally, that there's sort of a bombardment. All of those things are things I'm thinking about as we consider changes to policy. Personally, I'd rather go for something like a sign-up first before we consider limiting it only to matters on the agenda for that meeting only, and see what works and what doesn't. There are some people who participate remotely. It's challenging for them just to do it at all, and adding additional steps. We are imposing barriers if we do that. We need to recognize that. And we've been a council that has been very focused on removing barriers. So I think we need to think carefully about that. I'm not sure. Yeah, I guess we're not going to verify this information. We're at least at first, we're not talking. You can put whatever you want. You just have to put something. But not everyone might have access to a phone that is true, that theirs. I'm just thinking about the ways in which we're throwing up barriers, and we're throwing them up for everyone. So that's where I'm sitting.
Thank you. Counselor Gore.
Yeah, I have to agree with Alex. Counselor Jarrett, I think that limiting the public comment is kind of limiting an exchange of ideas between the public and the council. And I would still say that I would like to hear, public comment about any matter, not just things that are on the agenda. I think it's important to have that open to people who want to talk about other things. And as far as like a sign-up sheet, like they are putting up additional barriers to people, and I just, I can't really get behind that, because I think, it's kind of an across-the-board thing for a few people who have hate speech, which is protected, like Attorney Seawald said. This is protected speech. So I don't know. I just think that I wouldn't want to put any more barriers on the public comment. Besides, we already have the 2 minutes, which some people are upset about, and I just think about that meeting where there was like a lot of public comment, where you guys were here like until the middle of the night, and just how important that was to me as a individual out there in the public to be able to make a comment. And I think it's a really treasured thing that we have in this town, and I don't think that a few bad situations, and it was horrible, but should change our open forum like that.
Thank you, Councilor Gore. Did I see your hand?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I really appreciate what you both have brought up. I just want to name that a barrier is also created to people participating in government when there is a hostile environment that, over a large, amount of time, that is a barrier as well. If people feel intimidated and feel like they can't participate because of ongoing, hate speech. I'm just going to name that. And then I just want to clarify, so can we make different rules for, for remote? I'm not saying I want this, but could you make a rule where remote public comment is limited to the agenda, but in person is not, or something like that?
I can't tell you definitively whether that would be problematic. Again, as long as it's viewpoint neutral and you have a rational reason for doing it, I think that there's a fair chance it would be sustained. As long as you can articulate a reason for requiring different things in different platforms.
Thank you. I'm not advocating that at this moment. I just want to know all of our options. Thank you. Perhaps, I have a lot to say tonight, sorry. Perhaps this is a good moment to also say that a lot of this is experiential, and the world, the Zoom world, the world is changing quite rapidly. And just to remind counselors that we can amend rules at any point. So we can try something out, and if we're finding, as long as it's within the parameters that Attorney Seawald laid out for us, we can try something, and then we can change our mind, or amend it. And this is why we actually have built into the council a review of rules periodically. So we're not married to it forever if we wanted to try it out.
Thank you. Councilor Perry.
Unusually silent this time. I've been thinking about this a lot. I talked to the mayor about this and some of you other councilors. But I feel like Councilor Jarrett does, as I worry that a few people are able to cause us to have such a swift reaction to change rules makes me uncomfortable. I was uncomfortable stopping public comment at our last meeting because I felt that the people who were making these comments were winning. There's two parts of what they were doing, and one is to put out hate speech and degrade others, but the other is to disrupt democracy. And as Councilor Gore said, one of the things I really have loved is people being able to come to these public forums and speak their mind, especially in a time where people feel like their government is, they feel that there's a limited way to contact us. And so any way that we limit that also continues that narrative. So I like what Councilor Jarrett was saying about really looking at this in two parts. One is the sign-up sheet, and the other is whether or not we should change what people can comment on. And I am very uncomfortable having them only talk about stuff on the agenda, so I just put that out there. But in terms of the sign-up sheet, I was wondering, was there a reason why you have to do it an hour before? Was there some sort of thought process behind that?
It was picturing us and Laura trying to figure out that in terms of we're creating a new technology. It may be so simple that we can change it so it's, right up to council, and maybe it's live, but it being a new idea, we're just like, let's just make something we can do that we can picture working, and that would be the starting spot.
Because I also worry about, people who, we talk about people having access in the committee to study barriers, is that some people don't have computers or their ability is limited. So if you don't have a computer, you're going to a public library, you're going someplace, to make someone go to the library an hour before and then come back seems like an additional barrier. So I would suggest, I see no reason why if someone wants to do it up until we're there, because normally our agendas, last meeting we changed the order of agenda, so we put the public comment first. Normally we have a little bit of a buffer between when we start and then when public comment starts. So I would suggest changing that hour to be more accommodating, especially because some people do find it hard to navigate the city website as well, and to get to these meetings, so that is my suggestion.
Well, I will add that part of our thinking on that was to create a two-step process. That the idea was that for folks who are joining remotely, that they already have the privilege of, they don't have to get in their car to get here, that, that they're going to be comfortably in their homes, and that by creating the two-step, we would avoid the everybody showing up at once like we saw, that people who are really concerned about city matters and need to, share something remotely, they'll go in and say, you know what, I don't think I'm going to be there tonight. I'm going to get on the queue, it's there, and that, and I think for some of the folks who are out there looking for meetings to hop into, they may not do that. So maybe by me saying that, they now know that that would be our system, so. Counselor Jarrett.
Well, I know Zoom has an option for, well, I know this for webinars, where you sign up ahead of time and register to get the link, and that's required, and that process is fairly simple. I'm not sure if that requires a valid email address or, but just thinking something that's built into Zoom may be a fairly easy process but there's certainly requirements where it's done a certain amount ahead of time.
Mayor.
So webinars certainly have more ways that you can sort of control things. I haven't looked at them recently, but when I had looked at them in the past, one of the issues with them is that you wouldn't, let's say Director Mish showed up, you wouldn't be able to then sort of add Director Mish on Zoom if she hadn't been, signed up for the webinar. So you wouldn't be able to anticipate, you'd have to anticipate everyone who might show up that you'd want to be able to have the camera turned on and participate, I think. I'm not sure there's a way to kind of add someone in later.
Counselor Elkins.
A question that I have about, that kind of gets into that is like, and this maybe it's a little bit beyond that, but whatever we decide about this, and people are participating by Zoom in public comment, once that period is over, is there any reason why we must let people remain on the Zoom when they can watch on, Northampton Open Media? Like, that's, if they're on a computer and can participate by Zoom, then they can click on the YouTube link and watch that way. And once we get past public comment, then what? So I'm not talking about kicking people out during public comment, but I can't figure out, because it kind of came up that some of these folks who showed up at the last meeting were then, and I don't think you could see it on YouTube, and people in the chamber and those of us watching, like, in the Zoom could see that they were putting up all these, like, weird little reactions, and I couldn't tell exactly. Some of them seemed vulgar to me. I wasn't sure what they were. It's a question that I've had, which is like, people are here, you can watch on YouTube, and it's the public participation part is over. Why do we need to keep people on the Zoom after public comment beyond us?
They're watching the meeting.
Well, then they can watch, but I'm saying they can watch the meeting on YouTube. I mean, it's not participatory at that point, it's, we live stream it.
Mayor?
I don't have a legal answer to that. I don't know if Solicitor Seawald does, but I had always when I gave this a lot of thought in the past, it's when we were all remote, but I treated that as like chambers. So if you could be allowed to be here in chambers, then you should be allowed to be in that room that we were on Zoom. So it's sort of like a remote chambers. But those, I think Laura, and Councilor Foster, you can speak to this, I think Laura did some work to limit options of people putting up emojis and things like that.
Yes, Karen, go ahead.
Yes, raised hands should be all we see moving forward. Not the
So,
other. There's a way to change the reactions tab, so people will still be able to raise their hands. But the other things that you saw, one of them was a nose, by the way, but those will be, those won't be available in the reactions tab. Yeah.
So, as the presiding officer, I do hope I am hoping we can wrap this up by 6, because the mayor needs to be somewhere at 6:30. And that and I'm not sensing in the room that we're ready to move and vote on something tonight, but we have opened the doors on, we're looking at the options here. And that, and I appreciate the thoughtfulness. And I just want to thank Councilor Perry and Councilor Gore for making their statements, that as the presiding officer, I felt like some of the statements were directed at you folks as black people, and that my reaction is to be protective of everybody in the room.
Exactly.
And that I find it, I'm really grateful that for you serving on this council, that we could have the perspective, and that, and tonight, that, it was offensive, but you're like, this is free speech. This is about the public forum for Northampton, and that needs to be protected. And I really appreciated what you shared tonight. So it's one of the wonderful things about this council is just the range of folks on here and our abilities to speak to so many matters over this term. So anyway, is there anything else that people want to talk about? If people want to talk about ideas that we discussed tonight going forward, we can get something on our future agendas. Would that be people's pleasure, that maybe on the next council meeting, we take this up again, and maybe, I heard the idea of a two-step idea maybe, or thoughts on that?
Council President, could we maybe do like a little ad hoc committee of just a few of us who can kind of, and I know you guys have kind of, but pull together of course it would have to be, I don't know, I'm just thinking.
Well, this is what we did 2 years ago. We had a lot more time in the term where we had
Exactly.
a group of counselors who looked at our rules, and that prior to this, I had plans to look through our rules and make some recommendations in December for us to tweak things. That was before all of this, and that I just saw some procedural stuff that we could correct. But yeah, that is definitely something we could do. Councilor Jarrett.
We could also consider referring rules to a committee. I'm not sure which would be most, probably legislative matters would be the one that would be most appropriate to, because it's about our rules. Maybe, I'm not sure. But we could discuss it in committee as well. The other way that we create committees is a select committee. Is there a room for an ad hoc committee within our rules?
Well, I would do what we did last time. It was a select committee, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we would create a select committee that would be together for roughly a month. And I do like the idea of maybe sending it to an existing committee, and, because they're all ready to go. So,
Yeah, I don't really want to belabor it. I wouldn't want to do something that, because, I mean, we're not ready to vote tonight, but I think we could, I think we could be pretty quickly, more quickly than that. So I was suggesting in the interest of not belaboring things, not to make it longer.
Council President?
Counselor Foster, then Counselor Maori.
Well, up to 4, a couple of counselors could always bring a proposal to the council. So that's something that can happen kind of on any matter.
Counselor Maori.
Yeah, I feel a little resistance about an ad hoc committee, because then you have to have some admin support, and I feel like if we could use existing structures. I'm just thinking, even if we were ready to vote on this tonight, it would be referred to legislative matters, correct? So, no, if we could just, it's not considered a council rule. I'm just wondering what our options are with this piece of legislation, if we can refer it tonight, or that's a topic on the agenda. Maybe perhaps the next step is to follow up with an agenda item on it. Is that what you?
Counselor Jarrett.
So the jurisdiction of legislative matters includes the rules of the city council, but it has to be referred. Where legislative matters can't generate its own topics. They must be referred. So we could certainly say, at any time, we could refer something to legislative matters, and it would take that up, not for this Monday's agenda, but we could hold a special legislative matters one if we wanted to do that before our December meeting.
That's why I'm just wondering if that's maybe the path forward with this would be to refer it to legislative matters. That's one option. It might not kind of give us a path forward for our next few meetings, so that might, not be helpful that way, but so something to think about.
Well, I'll say I'm actually comfortable with that idea, in that I've been hearing two things from the public. One is, make some rules. Please stop it. Make it go away. You can do this. Why are we listening to people from elsewhere? It's actually been encouraging to hear people say, I can't believe you're listening to that stuff, and it's like, and then at the same time, talking with Bill Newman today, and he's like, this may go away. This stuff happens and fits and starts, and, you shouldn't be making legislation based on things that just appear every so often. And so I think it'll be interesting to see what happens next Thursday, and that, but I do think we could entertain a motion to refer this to legislative matters, and then this will get on, they'll look it over and make some recommendations and bring it back to us at some point in December.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I was going to move to refer it to legislative matters.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion made by Counselor Elkins, seconded by Counselor Moulton to refer this rewording of 4.8, dealing with public comment. Any further discussion on that referral?
Godspeed, legislative matters.
All right, hearing none, we're all here, so we can do a voice vote. All in favor of referral, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? None. So this item has been referred to legislative matters. Is there anything else people would like to discuss? Counselor Jarrett.
I would appreciate some guidance on the timing that the council might prefer. We can't, it's too late to add it to Monday's agenda, which is already quite large.
Yeah.
but our next one after that would be December 11th. So I imagine we'd want to do a special meeting before then, and I just wanted to hear from the council that that would be, to have something to report back maybe before our December 7th council meeting.
That would be terrific, because I'm hoping that our last meeting will be item-free. Hear that, Mayor?
I'm not making any promises.
Well, as a member of Legislative Matters, I concur. I would think we'd want to schedule a special meeting at the week after Thanksgiving and have something, actually, it's, Councilor Jarrett, it's going to be the December 5th council meeting, which we've
Oh,
changed
right.
from
Thank
the
you.
Thursday to the
Correct.
Tuesday. So if we could have something ready for that one, I think that would be ideal.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, that sounds great. All right. Thank you, Legislative Matters, which includes me.
And please,
I changed my mind, should go to finance.
All right, any further discussion, on this matter tonight? Okay, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, motion to adjourn made by Counselor Perry, seconded by Counselor Elkins. All in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions, any nays? All right, we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.